I hope you came ready to hear what Jesus wants to say to you this morning. We had a great first service and anticipating what God wants to say, and it's a privilege to be here. I was here a little while ago. It's been about a year ago, and so it's a privilege to be back. You guys got a new building now, so this is fantastic. It's beautiful, so fantastic. Let me go ahead and just pray for us, and then we're going to dive right in. Jesus, we humble ourselves and just pause for a moment. We've come in with lots of things on our mind, but we desperately need to hear from you this morning. So we invite you to speak. We know you were here, your spirit was here long before we got up this morning. But would you speak directly to our hearts? You know exactly where we are and what season and stage of life we're at. So we invite you to move. In your name, amen. So what do you guys do when things don't go the way you planned? Like maybe it was a family vacation that went sideways. I'm sure that's never happened in a group like this. Maybe it's a day of work. Maybe it's you give everybody rocks and at a service at church and they decide to throw them at you instead. I don't know, hypothetically speaking. How about a first date? Anyone have a first date ever go a little bit weird? Anybody willing to confess that in church? No? Okay. Well, I did. I had this all planned out. Are you guys with me? Or are you just trying to figure me out right now? You're giving me the figure out face right now, like, should I pay attention or not pay attention? Okay, so first date with Erica. Spoiler alert, she's now my wife, okay? So at least you know that. But I knew this was going to be a very special day. I could tell she was just fantastic. And so I decided I planned it all out. And guys, if you don't know this, if you're single, you need to plan this all out. Guys, if you're married, you need to put a little effort in and plan things out for your wife. But side note, okay, so I planned it all out, and I have just the perfect line to give her that'll make her fall head over heels for me. And so I wait for the moment to be right, and I could tell this was it. So I gave her the best pickup line of all time. Do you want to hear it? I didn't believe you, but I'm going to say it anyway. You may want to write this down. You could put it in your phone, whatever you want. When the moment was right, I looked deep into her eyes, and I said, just so you know, I'm moving to Africa. And I paused and I let it linger like this, and then I went like this, waiting for her to fall so I could catch her and I could sweep her off, her feet, and we would just ride off in the sunset. That's not exactly what happened. Instead, without even taking a breath, without even skipping a beat, she said, just so you know, I'm never leaving Louisville, Kentucky. Which is her hometown. I don't know if you know, Louisville is actually called the city of son-in-laws. And I learned that the hard way. So I decided that we should get married and we should move to Africa. And we did, and it was amazing, and God showed up. But I don't know if you know this, oftentimes, at least in my life, the hardest things have led to the best things. And when things don't go as we planned, which is usually pretty often, we've got a major decision and intersection of our life. We've got to decide. Am I going to let that situation, that challenge, that circumstance fill up my mind and my mindset and my heart, my life, or am I going to let God define me and fill me? And we know that from this, okay, that's really nice on a Sunday morning kind of level, but when it comes down to Monday through Saturday, it can be a little challenging, can't it? Said another way, whatever fills you forms you. Lots of things challenge to fill and form us, don't they? Whatever fills you will form you. I want you to tell your neighbor, whatever fills you forms you. Go ahead. Now I want you to tell that neighbor like you really mean it. Whatever fills you forms you. And now if you've got another person next to you, you can say, even though you were my second choice, whatever fills you forms you. Lots of things fill and form us, right? You may have you get an email message and just from your boss and you're just like, oh, again with this? Oh. It can kind of just bring you down. Or maybe you compare posts and photos with someone online. You say, man, their vacation is so much better than mine. Or their food looks better than mine. Their kids are better behaved than mine. Why does it seem? And you compare and you think, well, if that's what happiness looks like, I guess I'm not happy. Maybe there's a relationship that's toxic and it's filling and forming you. Maybe it's just your diet that literally is filling and forming you, and you know you need to change stuff, right? But I was under heavy attack after the first service. Everyone's like, have a donut, have a donut, have a donut, you know? And so I was like, I will not let that fill and form me, you know? And so I just want to spend a few minutes talking about how do we become intentional about what fills and forms us. So tell me what you see of this picture here. I was a missionary for several years, my wife and I in Uganda, and this is not our driveway. This is a game park, so where you see animals and stuff and pray they don't eat you and all that kind of stuff. It's a new take on a zoo. And so just shout out here, help me out. What do you see in this picture? What do you notice? Tree? Dirt road? Pothole dirt road, definitely. It's dirty. There's no houses. I love this photo because when I see it, it reminds me of margin. It's wide open space. We need margin. When we don't have margin in our lives, and you guys know it. If I were to ask you, hey, how are you doing? You would say probably two things. I'm doing good, even if you're not. And then you would say, oh, but I'm really busy. Most of us run at a frantic pace. From event to event, from post to post, from work thing to work thing, from sports thing to sports thing, from just we go. And then when we come to this intersection in our life, and there's a major decision, and we feel like we can't hear God's voice, we're like, God, what's going on? And we let all these things and all these people fill and form us, and when there's no margin, it's very hard to hear God's voice. Margin's that space, right? It's literally, if you guys remember what paper is, you guys remember paper? It's that white thing around the edge. It's like about an inch or so, or if you use your Word doc, you can adjust your margins. But margin's that space from where I am to where I'm going next. Margin lets our brains literally process. We're in the information age, over 3,000 messages a day we're hit with, and so our brains are Googling like crazy, but we don't have time for margin. Even these few seconds of me being silent and staring at you, some of you are like, dude, get on with it. Like, keep it moving. Let's go. I got lunch to go to. And we struggle to hear God's voice because there's no margin. And so lots of things fill and form us. But it's built into our culture. Sports teams, things are going sideways, 20-second timeout. They break it up. There's margin. You can go to a concert and they'll break up while the next band sets up. You go to a play and there's something in between. And there's margin built in because our minds need this. So what I want to do, I want to spend a couple of minutes looking at an Old Testament character so we can be intentional about what fills and forms us. Pick your neighbor again this time, no pressure, but tell them whatever fills you forms you. Turn to 1 Kings. If you have a Bible or a Bible app, go with me to 1 Kings 19. We're going to look at Elijah. You may know this story, you may not. Elijah is a prophet, and a prophet's job description is basically to speak out against injustice and oppression. And his job has brought him squarely against the king, King Ahab, who's king of Israel, but he's not exactly a godly, holy guy. You may remember in the previous chapter, he's had this God duel. There's the prophets of Baal over here, and then there's Elijah. And the first one to call down fire on their altar and the sacrifice wins. Pretty easy, right? So God shows up in a huge way. Elijah prays, and you remember the fire falls down. If you don't know this story, if you're new to faith, go check it out. It's amazing. The fire comes down and even just soaks up the water around it because they had poured all these tons and tons of gallons of water over the sacrifice. So God has just shown up in a huge way, right? Well, then Jezebel hears the news. By the way, anyone named Jezebel here? Anybody? Anybody know anybody named Jezebel? Isn't that weird? We don't even name our dog Jezebel anymore, right? Like, it's just, why is that? Because of probably this next line. She hears the news about her king, King Ahab, and he's like, Elijah defeated me, and she is ticked. And she says, she is furious, I want Elijah dead. And then verse 3, 19:3 says this, Elijah was afraid, and he ran for his life. Now, when people have threatened my life, I'm definitely afraid, right? But he's just defeated 450 prophets of Baal. He's stood his ground against the king. He's seen God literally not just give him a burning bush moment, but a pillar of fire has fallen down. Like, he has had more confirmation that God is real, God exists, God will answer his prayers than most humans have ever gotten. He is a superhero, right? Like, he is a legend. But all of a sudden, he gets one threat, and he takes off. He starts running and running and running, and this is not like a baby kind of marathon or anything. This is a huge Ironman kind of triathlon. It's 383 miles from where he is, a 7-hour drive today. He takes off running and running, and the text tells us that he gets tired and exhausted, and he falls asleep, and then God brings him some Chick-fil-A under a tree, and that's what you're going to have in heaven. So it's Chick-fil-A, and it's unlimited nuggets, and it's just awesome. And so he eats and he keeps going, and he gets to Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, the mountain of God, where God has met Moses and delivered the 10 Commandments. And then the text tells us he crawled into a cave and he spent the night. Why does this happen? Why does Elijah respond this way? I think it's no margin in his life. He has been doing ministry. He has been pouring out. He has been investing. He has been trying to serve others, and he is exhausted. He is running, and he's running, and he's running, and all of a sudden, he's let all that just affect him, and he's not thinking right. He's not thinking straight, and so he runs, and he's letting fear fill and form him. And I don't know what you're like, but when I'm stressed out and I'm exhausted and I've just been going and going and going, I get hangry, right? Like angry and hungry together, and I don't make great decisions. And when there's no margin in my life, I just let the craziest stuff take over my thinking and my heart and my mindset. And so he crawls into the cave. And God just meets him with a simple question. Look at verse 9. Hey, what are you doing here, Elijah? Now, you can hear that several ways. I don't know your background. I don't know if you grew up in church or if you didn't, but you may have this concept, like some people do, that God is just like, a mean kid with a magnifying glass waiting to burn you, like an ant or something. Or he's like Zeus with a lightning bolt. He's just waiting for you to mess up, right? And so you might hear him say, like, what are you doing here? Like angry or attacking. I don't think that's how God is talking here. I think he's asking this question kind of more like when you ever run into someone out of your box, out of your context, like you get your church friends, and so like when you're at church, you know all their names, but then you like run into them like at I don't know, a store, and you're like, and you're panicking. You're like, I'm supposed to know them. Where do I know them from? And and I think it's more like that. Am I the only one that's ever happened to? You guys are looking at me like that's never happened to you. Don't lie in church. Not cool. All right. And so It's when they're not. So I think it's kind of like that surprise. I don't know how you surprise omniscience. You can't, but what are you doing here? And so here's how Elijah replies. And he wants to start drawing this out of Elijah because he knows that fear is filling and forming him. And so verse 10 says this. And now just allow me a little indulgence here. I'm going to read this the way I think he probably responded, just as if when I've been told I get a little whiny and complainy when I'm tired and stressed, and so those people aren't my friends anymore. And so here's what he says. Elijah replied, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant. They tore down your altars. They put your prophets to death with the sword, and I'm the only one left. Now they're trying to kill me too. Do you ever get crazy when you're stressed out? If you're married, don't elbow your spouse right now or anything like that. That's not going to be healthy. It's interesting, this actually happens twice. I love how God gives Elijah this place to kind of get it out, to vent. He didn't let him stay there. But the relational nature of God, he doesn't strike him dead. He just lets him process this because God knows I can't leave him here. He knows that this fear is filling and forming him. And right now, his perspective is skewed, his focus. He can't see the big picture. One of the things that we got to do, when we were missionaries in northern Uganda, we were on the border of South Sudan and Congo, planting churches, training pastors to do this. And so we got to go out and see, yeah, you can throw it up there. We got to see awesome images like this, like Aslan. So I was taking this group of college guys out, and they had helped us do evangelism and pastor training. And then, we got to take them on safari, because when you're in Africa, you want to see lions. And sure enough, we walk up, or we drive up, not walk up. You don't want to walk in a game park, by the way. And so I've got these guys on my Land Rover, and they're on the roof, and they're getting pictures. And I got to be honest, I was a little prideful, and so I really wanted to give them an awesome experience / scare them a little bit, because I don't know about you when you were 20, but yeah. And so, you needed to be humbled. And so, I got really close. I pulled the vehicle, the Land Rover, this close, and so they're on the roof, and I'm like, by the way, don't be loud. Lions hate that. And so they're taking their pictures, and they're trying to be quiet, and it's awesome. We see Aslan. It's great. He's so nice. And all of a sudden, I look over here, and I see this. Apparently, I am in a domestic dispute between these two lions because she looks angry. I don't know what you know about lions, but the female is the hunter. Yes, and we look like Chick-fil-A nuggets to her, and so you're like, what's up with all this guy's Chick-fil-A references? It's not even open today. Now I'm so hungry. I felt really bad, but I did do those guys' funeral for free, and so I felt like that made it right. But it's so interesting how our focus, we don't see the whole picture. We can get so locked in on our problem and our fear or that person or that situation that's just consuming us and filling us and shaping our mindset. And that's what happens in this cave. Elijah crawls in this cave, and caves are interesting. It's a very limited perspective, isn't it? I don't know if you've ever spent any time in a cave, but your eyes will start to adjust a little bit, and you kind of go from freaking out and panicking and all this anxiety to kind of it's a pretty nice cave. It's dark, it's dungy, but it's a constant temperature, and I can kind of feel these rocks. These rocks are kind of comfortable. And at least I can kind of see, I can control what comes in and what comes out. The view isn't great, but it's not bad, and I can see it and kind of count on it, and this is kind of nice. I can touch the wall. I can control. This is my little space. I got it all. Caves aren't meant to be lived in for very long, but they look pretty tempting. When you're in a cave of frustration or fear, a cave of bitterness, Jesus knows you and I can't stay in that cave forever. He knows Elijah can't stay in that cave because your view is so limited. You need to see bigger than what you're seeing now. And I need to help you get the focus off of you. You need to remember this is bigger than you. So God so gently says this, verse 11. Elijah, go out. Stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord wasn't in the wind, and after the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in the earthquake, and after the earthquake came fire, but the Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire came, what? Say it with me again. It's a trick question. Like, am I supposed to shout gentle whisper? Because that feels like it defeats the purpose of the whisper, but like, yes, a gentle whisper. Why all the theatrics? Why a whisper? I've got three young children, 6, 8, and 10, Ava, Caleb, and Jackson. And one of the things we do when we go to bed at night with them, we tuck them in, right? And we try to read them a Bible story, and we try to, pray with them, and then we lovingly say, go to bed, and like, we've loved you all day. Now go to give us a rest, right? And like, we love them and we get really close to them, and we whisper in their ear, Jackson, hey, I love how you didn't beat up your brother today. Good job. Hey, Jesus loves you. Follow him with all your heart, buddy, okay? Hey, Caleb, good job encouraging your sister today. Keep following Jesus with all your heart. Ava, and we just spend that time whispering. Why does God whisper? How close do you have to be to hear a whisper? Pretty close, right? And those who have kids or ever been a kid, maybe you remember sometimes a parent or grandparent or someone. Usually when they whisper, they don't just kind of get like sort of close. They get like cheek to cheek. You get right up there. It's so intimate. It's so personal. I think Jesus is speaking into Elijah's life, and he's like, hey man, you can't hear my voice clearly. You can't see clearly. He says, move closer. Move away from your fear. Move away from your bitterness. Move away from your limited perspective. Because when you're in that cave, here's what you're tempted to believe. And you know this, the father of lies. Do you know the devil, what he does? The devil shouts, lies! But God whispers truth. The devil will say, you know what, you are worthless. You are what everyone said about you in school. You're never going to amount to anything. You don't have what it takes. Your best days are behind. You're too young. You're too old. You're in the wrong stage. Your marriage isn't going to last. Your finances aren't enough. You're right. You should just give up. You don't need anybody but you. You got this. You're smarter. You don't need to believe in the Bible. You don't have to believe in all this stuff. You're better than that. I wonder if there's some people here today in a cave where you're believing some lies. And maybe like in the beginning of the book of Genesis, God's saying to you, who told you that? Where did you hear that? God whispers to us instead and says, no. You're loved. You're holy. You're chosen. Come be my child. Let me help you look more and more like the family image of God. Bear my image. Don't stay in that cave. Don't let what the indecision or the question is, don't let that be the thing that fills and forms you. Can I be really honest with you today, Southland? It's too late. I have the microphone, right? Sometimes when God asks that question, what are you doing here? I don't know if you're honest, or at least me, I would say, sometimes I say, what am I doing here? What are you doing here, God? Do you not see what I'm going through? I've been praying and praying. My prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, and you're doing nothing. Are you just too busy being God? Are you missing what's happening in real time, God? We're tempted to believe that lie. And so sometimes we'll say things, and we mean it very, very well, but we say this phrase, I'm just waiting on the Lord. And that is a very biblical phrase. But what I believe is that many of us use it out of context. See, some of us try to use it because we think, you know what, I'm just moving so fast, I need the decision like now, and so I am running obviously too fast for God. The creator of the universe can't keep up with me because I am awesome and amazing, and so I'm just going to slow down, and so God can catch up, and God's like, whew, thanks a lot, John, I was having a hard time keeping up with you. I mean, I spoke everything into existence, and I breathed out stars, but man, you are amazing, I couldn't keep up with you. We would never say that out loud, but that's kind of how I need the decision now. I need it actually yesterday. I need to post about it, and I need it, and I need to tell everybody about it. And so when we use that phrase, I know what we mean in our heart, but here's when the Bible uses it. It's when a person is facing this huge decision. They're at this challenge, this intersection of life that's so great that they're ready to run for their lives in the opposite direction. When the Bible says wait on the Lord, it's when you're about to lose your future because of your fear. It's when you're letting somebody or anything fill you except his presence. And so we think that God is waiting on us, but really God's waiting, we think he's waiting on God, but God's waiting on us. What if God's saying, take a step forward? See, anyone who has a deeper walk with God, who has just been probably a role model for you in faith, one of the most powerful distinctives of people who have lived lives of faith for a long time is they take initiative. They're people that take a step. And so yes, study God's word, pray about it, talk to wise counsel, ask the Spirit to lead you, but at some point, you've got to take a step. And so Yahweh, God, is talking to Elijah. And so what does he do? He asks him just to stand and take a baby step. And then he asks the question one more time. What are you doing here, Elijah? This time when he asks it, I believe he's asking it, what are you doing in this location? Why are you in a cave still? Yes, you need time to heal and margin and recover, but you can't do what I've called you to do if you just hang out here and hold on to this. You can't literally, do the things I want you to do staying in here. You're missing my best. What are you doing? What are you doing here, Elijah? So God is gently reminding him, would you let me fill and form you, Elijah? And he says, just stand. Come to the edge of the cave. And so Elijah, I picture him, I don't know how much time went by, but he baby steps his way to the edge of the cave, and all of a sudden his vision is a lot better. His perspective is changing. And then look what God says to him next. Verse 15. Then the Lord told him, go back the same way and travel to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive there, anoint Hazael to be king of Aram. Then anoint Jehu, grandson of Nimshi, to be king of Israel. And anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, from the town of Abimelech, to replace you as my prophet. Isn't it interesting, I don't know if you know this about God or not, how many times God has to take us back through hard places in our story? Maybe it's a hurt that you do not. We don't want to go through it. We want to go around it, right? We don't want to no, God, I put that sin away, and I don't want to deal with that. Or hey, I put that person in my past. They hurt me. I don't want to go back through it. God, But God says, would you let me bring freedom and healing and deliverance would you go back through? The other thing I noticed about that last passage, you notice that Elijah's obedience led to 3 other people receiving their calling. Most notable that we know of, many recognize this name, Elisha, who ends up being Elijah's successor. Here's what I know about God. He never does something in you just for you. It's always for more than you. It's just the way he's designed us. It's always to help others. Because he knows whatever fills you will form you. Tell your neighbor one more time. Whatever fills you, forms you. There's an urgency to this, friends. There's an urgency to us how we live, not just to sit here, but to go. The Great Commission, hopefully you guys know it, Matthew 28. Barnes research says that 51% of churchgoers in North America cannot even identify the Great Commission today. But as we're going to work, as we're sitting in 465 traffic and construction, the whole city of Indianapolis is under construction right now. As you sit there, as you're going, as you're picking up your coffee, as you're going to work, as you're at your kids' football game or soccer, as you go and have lunch today, as you go, we make disciples. Some of your neighbors, some are far, far away. But did you know, check this out, 150,000 people dying every day. It's 1 million a week. There's a huge, huge urgency. Out of that, there's 40%. 40% of the world's population, 2.5 billion people that have yet to hear the name Jesus, to even have enough information to make a decision to know, do I want to follow him? I love this quote, every Christian should live life with an open Bible and an open map. God didn't want Elijah's story to end in that cave of fear, bitterness, doubt, questioning himself. And he doesn't want your story to end there either. It's time for you to get those rocks out and not throw them at me. Thank you for having amazing self-control. The first group wasn't so great at that, but just kidding. I want you to go ahead and get those rocks out and just hold it in your hand there for a second. I want you to hold that rock in your hand and just begin just to feel a little bit. And I wonder what this rock might represent for you. I'll share a couple for me. It's these small things that seem like they weren't really obviously big. But when I told Jesus that I would go anywhere and do anything, when I told him I would fully surrender to him, turns out Jesus takes that prayer pretty serious. And so he would say, hey, can I have this? And sometimes I would say no. And Jesus is a gentleman. I don't know if you know that, but he'd say, please, it's hurting you. It's taking up space. And so he'd reach in and he'd say, would you trust me with relationships? You're making your dating life an idol, and so I gave that to him. I chose to give it to him, and then as I got to be a little bit older, I was in college, right, and I was trying to figure out major and what to do and where to go, and it feels so overwhelming, and so I said, God, I'll do anything as long as you don't make me go to Africa, and so outside of following him, marry my wife, best decision ever made. And so I said, God, okay, you can have my future. In each stage of life, God kept reaching in, and he still reaches in, and he says, would you trust me with your finances? I know you're terrified, but yes, God, I'll trust you. And then it was, how about your occupation? I know you long to be known and make it all about you. Would you stop being so prideful and give that to me? And I gave it to him. And then it was trusting him with my marriage, and it's trusting him with my kids. It's at each season something a little bit different. And you guys know this, you're really smart. There's nothing life-giving about a rock. It just sits there. It seems so small, insignificant. But here it sits in our life and it just takes up space. But the great thing is when you let the Spirit take that out, He doesn't just leave you empty. He fills and forms you. His Holy Spirit continues to make you more and more like Jesus, and He fills you up. It's possible maybe you don't know Jesus today. It's very possible though you do, and you did surrender to Him, and I don't know about you, but there's things in my life that I gave Him, but the depths of my own sin nature I didn't even know, and there's stuff that's come up, and I need to keep giving things to Him. Could they just hurt me? They're just barriers. They're not life-giving. I think you're a group of people who say, I want to be filled and formed by God. I don't want anything to hold me back. Would you guys stand with me and hold those rocks? In just a moment, Phil's going to sing a song. And as we do, you can see this. This is from the first service. I don't know what you know about the first service, but they are a lot of incredible godly saints. Most of them retired. It was a special moment to see these incredible people that have walked with Jesus so long continue to say, God, would you fill me, form me, cleanse me, and send me out into this world. And so as we sing, I want to invite you to come forward, and whatever this is for you, there's something that Jesus is asking you to lay down today so He can continue to fill and form you. So as you feel led, I want to invite you to kneel. If you want to kneel and pray, you can. If you just want to walk up and put the rock down, you can. But I think Jesus wants to do something in each of our hearts today. So as you feel led, you come forward and lay down your rock. Let Him fill and form you.